we are quite literally in a hallucination of our brains trying to take all of these things. Like, we have so much more data than we can actually handle with everything that's going on. And our brain has to have the capacity to say, only this is important, just focus in on this. And
that's the bullshit detector. I really appreciate when you said that, because I think there's such a key with self-deception. And I think that's part of the positive, that's part of that toxic positivity that's the term.
Right.
Like,
yes.
But I'm strong and I'm going to get a fifth of JD. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm curious for you, like, Chris, when you, especially with where you are and the level of authenticity is tip top. Like, what are your perspectives on a lot of this positive, this positivity, and like a lot of the trainers that are out here online, putting the material out? Like, what's your thoughts on this right now, man?
Yeah, I was actually toying with the idea, and I ran it past a couple of people, and I was like wanting to write an essay that was based around like the death of spirituality. And it was kind of like this toxic spirituality, this toxic personal development, this toxic like positivity. Like, for me, there's the middle way. There's the golden mean. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like far too many people swing to one side of the pendulum, and it's a case of just being like everything's all good. Just speak your affirmations and everything's going to be fantastic. And I know of people, and I distance myself from people in my personal life that just wanted to talk positive the entire time. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, that's not reality. Like, there is nothing wrong with calling a spade a spade. There's nothing wrong with being like, that's messed up, that has to change. And I struggle with the concept of people not wanting to do that, because it's weird. But again, on the other side of the pendulum, people are just negative, and it's just like, okay, well, can you please shut the hell up and bring some positivity to the conversation right now? So there's a dance, there's an interplay, and I think many things come back to the ability to hold the strain that a paradox brings. And I think that's where the case of, if I can hold that, do you know what I mean, tension of the paradox, I think that's where a lot of brilliance is in so much of life.
Have you subscribed? If not, this is the best time for you to subscribe, whether you're on the YouTube or on the podcast. Why? Because it would be a bummer if you missed out on everything that's to come, or don't subscribe if you're not actually getting much value out of this, because there is a zillion other things that you could be doing. So I'd rather you go and do that. The ball's in your court.
And so for me personally, I want to be able to, like, this is what I find amazing. And I could just be running off a crazy tangent right now. So like, bring me back.
Go for it. Go for it, bro.
We have this brain that's inside of this skull, and it only has these sensors that is able to then start figuring out what is actually going on outside of itself. So that's where it's like, I definitely start to pick up when someone says, or the saying of, do you know what I mean, you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. Because we are quite literally in a hallucination of our brains trying to take all of these things. Like, we have so much more data than we can actually handle with everything that's going on. And our brain has to have the capacity to say, only this is important, just focus in on this. And an example of this is, like, let's say you're at a social gathering, you're at a party of some sort, right? You're at an event. Now, you could be having a conversation with somebody, but then somebody else in the room says your name, and suddenly you pick up on it. Do you know what I mean? You hear your name get spoken from somebody on the other side of the room, and you start chiming into that conversation. Your brain is taking in the plethora of information of what's going on, and it's figuring out, what do I take note of? What do I discard and does not matter to me right now? And so we use these sensors to figure out what is actually going on. So, like it or not, we're in a hallucination the entire time. And that's where it's like, we think we're rational, but we're not, because there's a hell of a lot more that's actually going on.
Yeah, listen, we're in a hallucination. People in the back, did you hear that? People outside, did you hear it? Okay, Brian, we talk about this, right?
Yeah.
And this is and I appreciate so much of what you say, Chris, because this is along the lines of what Brian and I talk about. It's like we take in these senses, we take in so many senses, a plethora of senses that our brain just stores. And coming back to what you were saying about the story belief system, if I'm living my life on a story, then this plan I have right here, I could see it as bad. If I go rewire it, oh, junk, it's good now. There's this polarity that if people are stuck, I appreciate what you're saying there, because if people are stuck in this place of negativity, then all of a sudden they can't go to the other side. Then they're locked. There's no expansion to be able to go the range. That's the thing that I think is so fascinating with this positivity. And to be transparent, I was one of those cats.
Oh, totally do. I think we all kind of have to go through it as well. I think there's an evolution of growth of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I totally went through that stuff, and that's why as well I try my darndest when I see somebody else in that. I'm not judgmental and being like, oh, you're a second grade citizen for thinking that. No. They're just on their path. They're just on their journey. And just as well, do you know what I mean? Like, I know that tons of shit that I do is completely wrong, and people will be like, that idiot, right? Do you know what I mean? And so be it. And if they can call me out on it, then I'm totally open, and I want to know that so that I can better move myself forward.
Well, it's like a learning opportunity, right? If somebody calls you out, you're like, oh, John, thanks. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I never thought of that.
If you've enjoyed this episode and it's vibed with you, then make sure that you hit subscribe, whether you're on the YouTube or on the podcast. And importantly, if there is any guests that you want me to have on the show, or specific questions or topics that you want me to be able to cover for you, simply put it into the YouTube comments or send me an Instagram DM. That way I can make sure you're getting the most out of actually being here.